These three objects have something in common. You might say software, but there's something else. A group of minerals most people have never heard of. They are called rare earth elements, and right now, they are the center of a global power struggle.
They are being called the cocaine of the tech industry.
They are called rare earths.
Rare earth minerals.
Rare earth elements.
But rare earths.
All surrounding rare
The rare earth and battery materials.
The rare earth minerals.
The rare earth is a disturbance, but there's a lot of rare earth around.
The Middle East has oil. China has rare earths.
Rare earth elements aren't actually rare. You could dig a hole in your backyard and probably find some. The problem is that they are mixed with other elements and incredibly difficult to separate. There are 17 of them with names that, quite frankly, are difficult to pronounce. But here's what makes them special. They create the strongest magnets on Earth, they generate vibrant colors for screens, and they enable efficient conversion and control of energy, which means they're in everything. And as the world races towards clean energy, their demand is exploding. Now here's the catch. China controls roughly 60% of global rare earth mining and 92% of processing. The second figure, that's the one that matters, because mining rare earths is one thing, turning them into usable materials is something else entirely. It's expensive, it's environmentally toxic, and for decades, China was willing to pay the price that no one else would. How did this happen? In the 1980s, the US led the world in rare earth production. Mountain Pass, California, the largest rare earth mine outside of China, supplied most of the global market. Then China made a strategic bet. In 1994, they introduced tax rebates of up to 17% for rare earth exporters. They kept environmental regulations loose. They invested billions into state-owned enterprises, and they flooded the market. By the mid-1990s, Chinese production had surged 500%, and prices collapsed.
So how did they pull it off? What were the factors that allowed them to basically take this away from us?
Well, the advantage of lower labor costs would be a place to start. Also, environmentally, almost no environmental constraints around mining, safety considerations for the miners doing the mining, in huge contrast to the United States. So that translates directly into lower pricing.
Yeah.
And lower pricing can push other people out of the market.
So what happens when one country controls 90% of the resource the entire world needs? They use it. In April 2025, as trade tensions escalated, China imposed export controls on 7 rare earth elements. Then in October, they expanded restrictions to 12 elements. The message was clear: we control this and we can turn off the tap. The US sources around 80% of its rare earth supply from China, the EU about 98%. Here's the thing about rare earth export controls. China has used them before and they work. But every time China restricts rare earth exports, it reminds the rest of the world why they need to find alternatives, and that's what's currently happening. In July 2025, the US Department of Defense invested $400 million in MP materials to restart domestic rare earth production and magnet manufacturing. The EU launched Resource EU to stockpile rare earths and build processing facilities in Europe. Australia, Canada, and Vietnam are all racing to develop their own supply chains. The issue, though, is that building a rare earth supply chain takes years, maybe a decade. Processing rare earths domestically costs 2 to 3 times more than importing from China. And even if you mine the ore, you still need to refine it, make magnets, and of course, build entire infrastructure that these processes will run on. China spent 30 years building theirs, other countries are trying to do it in 5. So if the rest of the world can't outproduce China currently, what are some alternatives? Well, we could start by using less rare earth elements. Tesla announced that its next generation of motors will use no rare earth elements at all. BMW and Renault have already done this with some models. The trade-off, slightly less powerful motors, but for city driving it's more than enough. Engineers also are working on substitute materials, cerium instead of neodymium, magnets that perform just as well but with more abundant elements. And then there's recycling. Rare earths can be recovered from scrapped products and used to create new ones. These alternatives serve as a stopgap for the time being until rare earth production picks up in the rest of the world. Right now, rare earths and their control have become a focus for world powers, because the next decade won't just be about who builds the best EVs or the most advanced fighter jets. It will be about who controls the 17 elements that make them work. Rare earths aren't just minerals, they are leverage, and whoever controls them gets to decide what the future looks like.